Have you ever had a thought that scared you? Maybe something harsh, something dark, something that made you wonder, why did my mind even think that? And suddenly, for a moment, you felt like a bad person. You felt flawed. You felt broken, as if one thought had the power to define your entire identity. But let me tell you something that might change the way you look at yourself forever. Not every thought that enters your mind belongs to you. Some thoughts are echoes. Some are memories. Some are fears. Some are voices of people who hurt you. And some are nothing more than random sparks your brain produces without your permission. But here is the tragedy. You believe them. You let every passing cloud become a storm in your chest. You judge yourself for thoughts you never consciously chose. You punish yourself for noise your mind naturally creates. And then you wonder why you feel trapped, why you feel heavy, why you overthink, why you feel like you're losing control. It's because you've forgotten something powerful. You are the sky, not the clouds, not the storms, not the passing weather. You are the open, unshakable sky behind all of it. Your thoughts are not commands. They're not prophecies. They're not reflections of your character. They're simply events, experiences, movements of the mind, nothing more. But you've spent so many years tying your worth to the content of your thoughts that you've forgotten the truth. The real you is the one who is watching, the observer, the witness, the awareness that sees the thought appear and sees it fade. You've been fighting storms that were never meant to destroy you. You've been drowning in clouds that were never meant to define you. And the moment you learn to step back, to detach, to breathe, you will discover something liberating. Your thoughts have only as much power as the meaning you give them. What if today was the day you decided to stop letting your mind bully you? What if today was the day you finally understood? A thought is just a thought, not a truth, not a destiny, and definitely not you. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize their greatest enemy was never another human being, never society, never a lack of opportunity, and never even the pain of their past, but their own thoughts. Not because the mind is evil, but because nobody ever taught us how to relate to it. No one ever sat us down and said, listen, thoughts are temporary. They come and go. They don't define you unless you cling to them. Instead, we grew up believing every thought meant something about who we are. If we imagined the worst, we called ourselves negative. If we imagined something scary, we called ourselves weak. If we imagined something painful, we called ourselves broken. And slowly, without realizing it, we began merging our identity with whatever voice was the loudest inside us at any given moment. But pause for a second and really think about this. A thought appears before you even choose it. You don't sit there and create it with intent. Thoughts bubble up from the unconscious, from memory, from fear, from habit, from emotions, from conditioning, from the hundreds of experiences you've lived through. They rise like vapors. And yet you hold yourself responsible as if you deliberately crafted each one. Imagine blaming the ocean for every wave. Imagine blaming the sky for every cloud. It doesn't make sense, does it? But that's exactly what you do. People who overthink don't suffer because they think too much. They suffer because they believe everything they think. They don't know how to filter. They don't know how to let go. They don't know how to step back and say, this is just a passing cloud. I don't need to climb inside it. You've lived so long reacting to every thought that you've forgotten the most basic truth. You are not obligated to follow every mental storyline your brain creates. Just because a movie is playing doesn't mean you have to sit in the theater. Just because a thought appears doesn't mean it deserves your belief. Think about how many thoughts you have in a day. Hundreds, thousands. Some contradict each other. Some argue with each other. Some thoughts make you feel hopeful in the morning, but defeated by noon. If your thoughts were actually you, wouldn't they be consistent? Wouldn't they follow your values? Wouldn't they always make sense? But they don't. They jump, they conflict, they collide. The mind is a storyteller with no filter, no pause button, and no sense of timing. It throws scenes, images, fears, fantasies, and memories at you unpredictably. The problem isn't that the mind speaks. The problem is that you've forgotten you have the right to not take every word seriously. Here is something most people never understand. The mind doesn't care about your peace. It cares about your survival. Its job is not to make you happy, but to keep you away from danger. That's why it always imagines the worst-case scenarios. That's why it shows you fears before possibilities. That's why it tells you everything could go wrong. Not because you are negative, but because your brain learned long ago that fear is safer than optimism. Fear keeps you alert. Fear keeps you protected. Fear is your mind's way of saying, I don't want you hurt. But when you misunderstand this instinct, you start thinking there's something wrong with you. You start believing you're weak, anxious, or unstable, when in reality your brain is simply overprotecting you. Let me tell you something that may surprise you. You can have anxious thoughts without being an anxious person. You can have dark thoughts without being a bad person. You can have insecure thoughts without being an insecure person. Your thoughts reflect your conditioning, not your identity. They are patterns, not truths. They are habits, not self-portraits. If something heavy pops into your mind, it doesn't mean you are heavy. If something cruel appears, it doesn't mean you are cruel. If something scary rises, it doesn't mean you are weak. The real you is the one who notices the thought and questions it, not the one who blindly accepts it. Awareness is the difference. Awareness is the separation. Awareness is what creates space between you and the thoughts running through you. And that space is freedom. When you step into that space, suddenly, the same thought that once drowned you loses its power. Suddenly, the voice that once dictated your mood becomes nothing more than background noise. Suddenly, the storm becomes something you can watch instead of something you get lost inside. This is the shift that changes lives. The moment you realize you don't have to fight your thoughts, fix them, or fear them. You just have to see them for what they really are. Temporary, fluid, and powerless without your participation. You've forgotten that you are the one deciding what stays and what goes. A thought only becomes heavy when you pick it up and carry it. A thought only becomes painful when you replay it. A thought only becomes a belief when you feed it with attention. If you starve a thought, it dies. If you ignore a thought, it fades. If you question a thought, it loses its authority. Your mind is not your master. It's a tool, sometimes useful, sometimes noisy, but always separate from who you truly are. And here's something even more empowering. The moment you stop judging your thoughts, they stop scaring you. When you stop labeling them as good or bad, right or wrong, moral or immoral, they lose their weight. They become events you observe rather than enemies you battle. The real transformation begins when you realize you don't need to control thoughts. You only need to control how you respond to them. You've lived long enough believing your mind was the enemy. It's time to remember you are the sky, wide and open, holding every cloud without becoming any of them. And the moment you fully embrace that truth, peace stops feeling like something you chase and starts feeling like something you naturally return to. It's strange how we treat our thoughts as if they are laws, carved in stone. A thought says, "You're not good enough," and we accept it. A thought says, "People don't really care about you," and we shrink. A thought says, "You'll fail," and our body reacts as if the conclusion is already written. We rarely question these inner statements, yet we question everything else in life. If a stranger told you, "You'll never succeed," you'd argue back. But when your mind whispers the same sentence, you surrender instantly. That's the power you've given to a voice that was meant to be observed, not obeyed. The truth is, your mind plays every role. Some days it's the supportive friend reminding you to try again. Other days it's the critic, the judge, the fearful parent, the tired version of you replaying old wounds. It speaks in the tone of people who once hurt you, in the language of past failures, in the rhythm of all the memories you never processed. Sometimes the voice isn't even yours. It's someone else's doubt echoing through your nervous system years later. But because it happens inside your head, you assume it must be a reflection of who you are. You forget that the mind is a collector, and anything it has collected, it can replay. You've probably noticed this. Thoughts come in patterns. A certain situation triggers the same chain of ideas every time. Certain memory triggers the same emotional reaction, even if the moment is long gone. Without awareness, you become a puppet to the same mental scripts, repeating them for years as if they are fate. But imagine, just for a moment, you could step back and watch the pattern from a distance. Imagine you could say, here it is again. The thought I always have when I'm nervous. Suddenly the thought loses its power. It becomes predictable instead of threatening. You can name it, you can label it, and anything you can observe, you can loosen. This is what psychologists call cognitive separation, the ability to see a thought as an object instead of a command. When you say, "I feel like a failure," you merge with the feeling. But when you say, "I'm having the thought that I'm a failure," you create distance. That small shift in language is the beginning of emotional freedom. Every great spiritual teacher and every great psychologist in history taught the same lesson in different words. Watch the mind without becoming. And when you do, something incredible happens. The same thoughts that once paralyzed you become background noise. They still appear, but you aren't invested in them. You don't react. You don't attach. You don't make them personal. You just let them come, and you let them go. Imagine how peaceful your life would feel if you stopped attaching meaning to every mental flicker. Imagine how much energy you'd save if you didn't chase every worry or analyze every fear. Imagine how much calmer your heart would be if you treated thoughts the same way you treat clouds, present but temporary. Many people think peace comes from stopping thoughts altogether. But that's a misunderstanding. You don't need to empty your mind. You need to stop wrestling with it. You need to stop fearing it. You need to stop assuming that a thought requires a reaction. When you stop feeding a fire, it burns out on its own. Thoughts are the same. The moment you stop fighting them, they weaken. The moment you stop believing them, they transform. The moment you stop giving them emotional fuel, they dissolve. And here's where it gets even deeper. You are not only separate from your thoughts, you are also stronger than them. You've survived every mental storm you've ever had, even the ones that felt like they would break you, even the nights when fear screamed louder than hope, even the mornings when your mind told you you couldn't handle another day. You made it. You're here, which means you are more powerful than the darkest thought you've ever had. But you forget this because you look at your thoughts during your weakest moments and assume they reflect your strength. They don't. They reflect your state. and states change. Think about the last time you were exhausted. Your mind probably sounded hopeless, bitter, emotional, overwhelmed. But when you rested, everything softened. Why? Because thoughts rise from the body and the nervous system. When your system is stressed, your thoughts turn into alarms. When your system is calm, your thoughts turn into guidance. Instead of asking, why am I thinking this, you should ask, what state is my body in that is creating this pattern? Because the mind isn't the beginning, it's the echo. And the most important realization is this: not every thought deserves your attention. Your attention is your currency. Your awareness is your power. Whatever you feed grows, and whatever you starve fades. You've been feeding the wrong thoughts for too long. You've been watering weeds and wondering why your inner garden feels chaotic. But the moment you start choosing which thoughts to invest in, everything shifts. When a thought says you can't, you don't have to engage. When a memory stings, you don't have to relive it. When fear tries to predict the future, you don't have to agree. You have the right to let a thought pass without holding it. If you lived your entire life believing your thoughts defined you, of course you'd feel overwhelmed. Of course you'd feel unstable. But now that you're learning to separate, to observe, to detach, a new sense of freedom begins to rise. You begin to see that your worth was never measured by the storms in your mind, but by the sky-like awareness that holds them. And the more you practice this, the more you notice something surprising. The mind becomes quieter when it's not feared. Thoughts lose their intensity when they're not chased. Anxiety collapses when you stop believing every worst-case scenario. Peace isn't the absence of thought. It's the mastery of relationship. It's the understanding that thoughts are visitors, not definitions. Clouds, not identity. And once you truly understand this, you stop living at the mercy of your mind. You begin living from the strength of your awareness, the unshakable part of you that has been there all along, waiting for you to return. There is a moment in your personal growth when you finally understand that your mind is not trying to destroy you, it's trying to protect you, but in the most clumsy and outdated way possible. It pulls from old memories, old fears, old patterns, and old versions of you. It reacts based on what hurt you in the past, not what empowers you now. The problem is that the mind rarely updates itself unless you teach it. It keeps using the same survival strategies it learned years ago, even if they no longer serve you. This is why your thoughts often feel repetitive. This is why the same worries come back. This is why the same insecurities show up in different situations. Your mind recycles old information because it hasn't yet realized that you've grown. Imagine your mind as a guard dog who loves you but doesn't understand anything except barking at shadows. It panics when you step into something new. It panics when you take risks. It panics when you start healing. Not because the new path is dangerous, but because the mind is afraid of the unknown. The unknown feels like a threat to the nervous system. And so your thoughts become louder, more dramatic, more negative. But here's the twist. This isn't a sign that you're going in the wrong direction. It's often a sign you're going in the right one. Growth activates fear because growth requires stepping outside the comfort zone where the mind feels in control. And whenever the mind feels out of control, it tries to pull you back using the only tool it has. This is why, when you decide to improve your life, your mind suddenly attacks you with doubts. When you finally choose to leave a toxic situation, your thoughts remind you of every painful possibility. When you choose to chase a dream, your mind floods you with what if you fail. None of this means you're not strong enough. It means your mind is trying to keep you safe using outdated fear-based logic. The irony is this: your mind thinks it's protecting you, but in reality, it's protecting the version of you that no longer exists. But here's where something powerful begins. The moment you realize your thoughts are not attacks, they are alarms. And alarms don't always signal danger. Sometimes they signal change. Sometimes they signal discomfort that leads to transformation. Sometimes they signal you are on the edge of breaking your old identity and stepping into a new one. When you shift the meaning of your thoughts from threat to signal, everything changes. You stop taking fear personally. You stop assuming doubt means failure. You stop believing your mind's worst-case scenarios are predictions. Instead, you see them for what they are, echoes of an older you. Here's a truth many people never hear. Your mind has a memory, but your soul has a direction. And the mind will always pull from memory, while the soul pulls you toward the future. Whenever you feel inner conflict, it's simply the mind trying to keep you where you've been, while your deeper self tries to take you where you're meant to be. Thoughts will try to keep you familiar. Growth will try to help you evolve. And you have to decide which voice you'll follow. There's a reason your mind becomes louder right before you level up, right before you make a brave decision, right before you finally say, I'm done carrying this pain. That resistance is not a sign to stop. It's a sign to lean in. Your mind resists what your heart needs because your mind is wired for safety, not destiny. And the moment you understand this, you begin to talk to yourself differently. You stop saying, why am I thinking this? Something must be wrong with me. Instead, you say, my mind is scared. That means I'm changing. That means I'm stepping into a new chapter. And when you respond to your mind with understanding rather than judgment, something begins to soften inside you. The fear loses its sharpness. The thoughts lose their authority. The panic loses its grip. You start to see the childlike nature of the mind, always afraid of losing control, always imagining danger, always fearing uncertainty. And what do you do with a scared child? You don't fight it. You soothe it. You guide it. You reassure it. You tell it that the future might be different from the past, that not every unknown is a threat, that the discomfort is not a sign of danger, but a sign of expansion. This is how you begin retraining your mind, by teaching it that not every change equals pain, by showing it through action that you can survive discomfort, by reminding it that you are no longer the wounded version of yourself that needed protection. Over time, the mind learns new patterns. The guards relax, the alarms quiet down. But none of this happens through force. It happens through awareness, compassion, and repetition. Let's go even deeper. Your mind is addicted to certainty. It wants control. It wants predictability. It wants everything to fit into a story it already understands. That's why it becomes anxious when something unpredictable happens. But here's the psychological irony. Nothing in life is certain. Nothing is completely predictable. The only thing you can control is the way you respond. And when you finally accept that uncertainty is part of every meaningful journey, something miraculous happens. Your relationship with your thoughts changes. You stop trying to eliminate fear. You start learning to walk with it. Fear becomes a companion instead of a jailer. Doubt becomes a doorway instead of a dead end. Thoughts stop feeling like enemies and start feeling like signals you can decode. When your mind says, you can't do this, you answer, maybe this is the part of me that's afraid, but not the part of me that knows my potential. When your mind says, what if everything goes wrong? You answer, what if everything goes right? When your mind says, you're not ready, you answer, Nobody ever feels ready. We become ready by moving. And the day you begin responding to your thoughts this way, you become unstoppable. Not because you eliminated fear or uncertainty, but because you stopped letting them control your path. You realized the goal was never to silence your mind. The goal was to rise above it, to understand it, to guide it, instead of being guided by it. Your thoughts will always come and go, shifting like weather. But once you understand that you are the sky wide, open, spacious, and unaffected, you stop fearing the storms. You start walking through life with a deeper sense of inner strength. You begin making decisions from awareness, not fear. You begin trusting your inner direction more than the noise in your mind. And that is the moment you begin stepping into the person you were always meant to be. There comes a turning point in your journey when you stop asking, why am I thinking like this? And you start asking, what is this thought trying to teach me? That shift alone can transform your entire life. Because the truth is, thoughts are not here to torture you. They're here to reveal you. They show you where you're still wounded. They show you where you're still afraid. They show you the parts of yourself that need awareness, healing, and compassion. But because we were raised to judge ourselves harshly, we react to thoughts with fear instead of curiosity. We run from them. We hate them. We try to silence them. And in that resistance, they grow strong. The mind isn't your enemy. It's your mirror. And mirrors don't lie. They simply show you what you haven't yet addressed. If a thought triggers you, it usually means there's something deeper underneath. Maybe it's a belief you picked up as a child. Maybe it's a fear you never dealt with. Maybe it's rejection, abandonment, shame, or guilt that still echoes inside you. People often misunderstand this part. You are not responsible for the thoughts that appear, but you are responsible for how you choose to respond. This is where emotional maturity begins, in response, not reaction. Think about how you've handled difficult thoughts in the past. When fear rose, you panicked. When self-criticism appeared, you believed it. When doubt whispered, you postponed your dreams. But what if, instead of reacting, you paused? That small pause can change everything. That moment of stillness between the thought and your reaction is the birthplace of freedom. Because in that pause, you see clearly, this is just a thought, not a fact. This is old conditioning speaking, not my truth. This is fear being loud, not reality being defined. The moment you begin observing your thoughts with neutrality instead of judgment, you gain power over them. A thought that once drowned you becomes something you can watch from a distance. A memory that once made your chest tighten becomes something you can breathe through. The sting remains at first, but the control weakens. The emotional charge begins to fade, because awareness dissolves intensity. When you stand back, you stop feeding the thought with fear. And every thought you refuse to feed eventually dissolves on its own. This is the psychology behind mindfulness, not the trendy version, but the real internal shift. It's not about sitting cross-legged on a mat and forcing silence. It's about reclaiming your internal space. It's about noticing the swirl of thoughts and choosing not to lose yourself inside them. You become the watcher instead of the victim. You become the observer instead of the reactor. You become the presence behind the thoughts instead of the one controlled by them. And something beautiful happens when you live from this place. Your thoughts begin to change naturally. You don't force them to. You don't manipulate them. You don't push them to be positive. They shift because you've stopped giving energy to the negative ones. An unobserved thought can torment you, but a thought observed loses its bite. It becomes just another cloud moving through the sky of your awareness, temporary, impermanent, harmless. Most people think healing is about changing their thoughts. But no, healing is about changing your relationship with your thoughts. When you stop believing every mental narrative, when you stop taking your mind so seriously, when you stop giving fear the power to define your identity, something incredible awakens inside you. You realize you've always had two voices within you, the mind and the self. The mind is loud, reactive, emotional, programmed, and conditioned. The self, your deeper awareness, is quiet, calm, wise, and unshakable. When you start listening to that deeper voice, everything shifts. You begin making choices that align with your heart instead of your fear. You begin creating boundaries that reflect your growth instead of your wounds. You begin speaking to yourself with compassion instead of cruelty. You begin trusting your intuition more than your anxiety. You begin living from a place of inner strength instead of inner chaos. Because the truth is, you are not here to silence the mind. You're here to rise above it. You're here to understand it. You're here to guide it. You're here to teach it that you are safe now, that the past is over, and that not every unknown is a danger. There's a psychological concept called cognitive diffusion. It means creating distance between you and your thoughts. And when you practice this, you stop merging your identity with every thought that appears. You stop saying, I am anxious, and instead say, I am noticing anxiety. You stop saying, I am not good enough, and instead say, my mind is repeating an old belief. You stop saying, I am failing, and instead say, a thought of failure is passing through. This shift seems subtle, but it is massive, because the moment you separate yourself from the content of your mind, your identity becomes rooted in awareness, not in fear. Life becomes lighter. Your emotional world becomes softer. The storms become easier to navigate. You start living with more clarity, less pressure, more courage, less hesitation, more self-trust, less self-doubt. You become someone who can feel deeply without losing control. Someone who can face fear without collapsing. Someone who can have a negative thought without spiraling. You become mentally strong, not because you never struggle, but because you no longer mistake every struggle for a truth. And here's the final piece. When you stop identifying with your thoughts, your true self finally has room to emerge. The wise part of you, the grounded part of you, the part that knows who you are and what you're capable of. The part that doesn't panic when fear rises, doesn't collapse when doubt appears, doesn't shatter when old insecurities whisper. This is the version of you that sees thoughts as weather, unpredictable, temporary, shifting, but never more powerful than the endless sky behind them. This is your awakening. The realization that your thoughts can pass through you without shaping you. The understanding that you can observe every storm without becoming the storm. The truth that no matter how loud the mind becomes, the real you remains untouched, steady and free. There will come a day, maybe sooner than you think, when you look back at the version of yourself who believed every thought, who feared every inner whisper, who took every mental storm personally, and you will feel compassion, not shame. Because that version of you was doing the best they could with the understanding they had. They were surviving, not living, reacting, not choosing, being pulled by the mind instead of guided by the deeper self. But now you know something powerful. You are not the thoughts that drift through your mind. You are the awareness that watches them change. You are not the clouds. You are the sky they move through. That sky has always been there, wide and patient, waiting for you to remember your true nature. It doesn't fear storms. It doesn't judge the weather. It doesn't cling to passing shapes. It simply observes. knowing everything comes and everything goes. This is the freedom you've been seeking without realizing it. Not the absence of thoughts, not the elimination of fear, not the perfect mental state, but the ability to witness your inner world without losing yourself in it. The ability to stay grounded even when the mind becomes noisy. The ability to feel emotion without becoming it. The ability to let every thought pass without letting any thought define you. Imagine walking through your life with this awareness. Someone criticizes you, and instead of spiraling, you watch the thought rise. Maybe they're right, and you let it pass. Fear whispers, you might fail, and instead of shrinking, you say, thank you for the warning, and you move anyway. Doubt says, you're not enough, and instead of believing it, you say, that's an old story, and you continue forward. You become someone who is no longer controlled by the mind, but gently guiding it, like a parent guiding a child who doesn't yet understand the world. And slowly, something beautiful happens. Your thoughts begin to reflect your strength instead of your fear. Your mind learns from your awareness. It updates, it softens, it becomes a partner instead of an enemy. But this only happens when you stop running from your thoughts and start watching them with curiosity, compassion, and distance. Life won't become perfect. Thoughts won't disappear, but you will no longer mistake every cloud for a storm. You will no longer treat every passing idea as a reflection of your worth. You will no longer let fear write your story. You will finally understand that thoughts are guests, and you are the home they visit. So the next time a heavy thought rises, pause, breathe, step back. Remind yourself, this thought is not me. This fear is not me. This story is not me. It is just a cloud drifting across the sky of my awareness. And the sky, your true self, remains clear, open, and untouched. That is your power. That is your freedom. That is the beginning of your peace. Hadza, YouTube description, high retention, motivational psychology style. Your mind is loud, but it isn't you. Your thoughts are dramatic, but they are temporary. Your fears feel real, but they are not your identity. This video is a deep psychological awakening, a reminder that every thought you experience is just a cloud passing through the sky of your awareness. You are not broken. You are not your overthinking. You are not the storm inside your mind. You are the sky behind it, calm, clear, permanent, untouched. If you've been struggling with anxiety, overthinking, self-doubt, emotional heaviness, or the constant noise of your inner critic, this message is for you. You will learn why your mind thinks the way it does, how to detach from negative thoughts, how to stop believing everything your mind says, how to create distance between you and your thinking, how to finally find mental peace, clarity, and emotional strength. This is not a positive thinking video. This is a psychological shift, an emotional awakening, a realization that can change the way you live forever. Stay till the end. One insight can change your life.